From our State House studio in Montgomery, I'm Todd Stacy. Welcome to Capitol Journal. It was a busy week in the Alabama legislature as lawmakers met for the 19th, 20th, and 21st days of this 30-day session. That means we are more than 2/3 of the way through, with just 9 legislative days remaining between now and mid-May. There was more movement on the state budgets this week. The Alabama Senate took up and passed the Education Trust Fund budget that funds the range of education programs from pre-K all the way through higher ed. Senate Education Budget Chairman Arthur Orr says the $9.9 billion plan delivers major investments in student achievement, teacher support, and school facilities. The most significant change is a new funding formula under the RAISE Act, short for Renewing Alabama's Investment in Student Excellence. Passed alongside the budget, the RAISE Act follows a year-long study of Alabama's K-12 funding system. Starting this fall, it will give schools extra money based on students' individual needs, including those in poverty, special education, English language learners, or gifted students.
We took a big step as a state today in that we established this RAISE Act fund because we're acknowledging that it does take more to educate children in poverty or English language learners or special education students or gifted students. And so in doing that, we want to provide more resources to our education community, our K-12 education communities and schools, and help them do the job that they have to do with additional resources. And that's important, and the research all shows that the additional resources do help move the needle when it comes to the educational process of those types of students.
Senator Wagner and I'm safe to say that the only 2 senators that's in the Senate now that was a part of establishing the foundation educational program. And to move the program to where we are trying to move it now, I think is a very positive step and a very good step.
They'll all go to good old Chairman Garrett, so he's waiting downstairs very eagerly. But I would say that we are working well together. There were even funding requests that were important to him that I wanted to go ahead and address in the Senate, and I'm sure we'll have some late requests of him in the House. So all that to say, working well together. I would hope we won't even have to go to conference, but I've also been around here too long to know that there's always something that pops up, but that's the goal.
Let's take a look at some of the specifics on the Education Trust Fund. As I mentioned, the base budget is $9.9 billion. That's a record amount and a 6% increase over the current year's budget. On top of that, there's $350 million to pay for increased costs of the new student funding formula. The Advancement in Technology Fund, which pays for things like computers and other school equipment, is at $1.25 billion. And there's $524 million in supplemental appropriations. That comes from better than expected revenues this fiscal year. So, all told, the plan includes $12 billion in education spending. With the Trump administration seeking wide-ranging cuts, including some that impact education, many have been concerned about Alabama's federal education funding being threatened. APT's senior education reporter, Trish Crane, has been covering this issue, and I asked her for an update on the latest this week.
I guess you'd say we're kind of lucky, Alabama is, in that, and these are updates from Dr. Mackey, our state superintendent. During COVID, there was all that federal pandemic relief money, bunches of buckets, lots of details. The third bucket of money, the biggest bucket of money, came through the American Rescue Plan. Well, it was so much money that there were extensions granted. Like originally all of the money, and money had to be obligated by September 30th of last year. They had, districts had until December 31st to spend it, but really through some technicalities, they had another year to spend it. Selma was one of a few districts that hadn't spent all their money, and they asked for late liquidation, which was fine. They were granted it, and then one Friday afternoon, an email came in that told states that, I'm sorry, the deadline's over. Like, we're not going to honor those extensions. But Dr. Mackey said today, so that was going to result in Selma losing about $4 million that they were going to use, they were using to construct a school.
Oh boy.
And so they have begun, Dr. Mackey told board members, they've begun an appeals process that's pretty detailed. So the Department of Education, even with, not granting any of the extensions that the previous administration had, the U.S. Department of Education Secretary said, we're going to give you a chance. If you really need this money, you can appeal to us, but we need details. But as Dr. Mackey said, Alabama really had spent almost all of its money. There are other states that have $300 million, $150 million,
Ouch.
A lot of money that all of a sudden they're not going to have access to. So we're in a better place than most states. We really only had a little bit left to spend.
One of the biggest issues of this session has been an effort to regulate pharmacy benefit managers. These are the companies that serve as the middleman between drug makers, insurance companies, and pharmacies to negotiate drug prices. In theory, the system is supposed to save costs from negotiating and buying in bulk. But pharmacists say they are not being compensated fairly by PBMs for expensive drugs, and they say it's running many pharmacists out of business. Senate Bill 252 from Senator Billy Beasley would require those pharmacy benefit managers to pay pharmacies more for the drugs they sell, including a $10.64 dispensing fee, the same as the Medicaid reimbursement. Many in the business community had opposed the bill, saying it would raise health care costs for businesses and consumers. But several amendments were added along the way to address some of those concerns. This week, the House took up and passed the bill, led by Representative Philip Rigsby, who is a pharmacist himself.
This bill aims to provide fair reimbursement to community pharmacies in Alabama, ensuring access to health care for small communities, especially our rural areas.
I commend you for your efforts, but whatever we need to do to hurry up and get this one out of here, and I'm taking my seat, I want y'all to pass SB 252. I don't even want an amendment to it. I just want it to pass. I appreciate the opportunity, Mr. Speaker. Thank you for everything that you pharmacists have done across this state to keep us informed. God bless you and God keep you.
There have been many ups and downs in this journey. And there were days I wanted to throw in the towel. But I realized that my flesh was telling me to quit. But thanks be to God, when I felt defeated, that's when my faith reminded me, we know that for those who love God, all things work together for good for those who are loved according to His purpose.
As a pharmacist, I lost pharmacy in February of 23 to this issue. And it was hard work to get the education done. There was a lot of grassroots effort. I had a bill last year that kind of failed miserably. But what it did do is brought a lot of awareness to the issue.
And just a few hours later, the Senate took up the amended version of the bill and gave it final passage, sending the PBM legislation to the governor's desk. Senate President Pro Tem Garland Gudger noted how rare it is for something so controversial to pass unanimously in both chambers.
This has been a win for the people of Alabama. It's been a huge win for community pharmacies in the state of Alabama who just want to be able to go to work, be able to make a living, and take care of their patients. I've been fighting this fight since the late 80s, and this is a big day. I'm so excited. I'm so proud of each and every one of you here.
Everyone had a win-win, and so just to name the people that have come to the table, right? This has been bipartisan, Democrats, Republicans, Blue Cross Blue Shield, BCA, PHIP, RSA, independent pharmacists, community pharmacists, chain pharmacists, and the whole body for the Alabama State Senate and the House of Representatives, and it passed unanimous on both floors. That's amazing, and I'm thankful that this is how government is supposed to work when we all work together. So thank you, Senator Beasley, for passing this, and I'm excited about today and that this just happens.
Another big legislative issue this year is an effort to allow the Alabama Farmers Federation to sell health benefit plans to its members. House Bill 477 from State Representative David Faulkner has been one of the most talked about bills of the session. In committee this week, an amendment was added to the bill mandating that the Department of Insurance have jurisdiction over such health plans. That came from members concerned that there aren't the same kind of consumer protections as traditional health insurance plans. That amendment did not sit well with Alpha or the bill sponsor, who fought to have it removed on the House floor a day later. Lawmakers debated for more than 2 hours, but eventually voted to remove that requirement and pass the bill.
I believe there were 98 yes votes on the final passage. So people wanted this bill. The only real discussion, and the discussion that came up, was about the stripping of an amendment that was put on in Health Committee. I wish that amendment had not gotten on. It was a close vote in Health Committee. As you noticed, most of the people on the Health Committee, many of them who voted for the amendment, did not vote for it and voted for me to take it off here on the floor. But whenever you do that, there's going to be questions. And I think that's where most of the questions came from. But what I want to say is let's don't let the time that this took, persuade anyone that this wasn't a popular bill. The House voted overwhelmingly in favor of it. It is going to be a good thing. You heard me enough out there, guys. There's 10 states doing this already. And Alabama, there's 5 states considering it now, including Alabama. So in their legislative session. So it's a very popular idea. It is something the farmers really want for their members. And so I think there's a lot of support behind this bill, as you saw.
And that bill now goes to the Senate. The House took up another controversial bill on the issue of hemp. House Bill 445 from State Representative Andy Witt would set tougher regulations for the sale of consumable cannabinoid items like CBD drinks or gummies. It would require the Alabama Beverage Control Board to be the industry's regulator. Witt says regulations are needed to protect children.
This is one of the bills that I think you saw wide bipartisan support. It affects every neighborhood across the state. These are unregulated, unchecked, and dangerous products that are being sold to our children in our convenience stores and retailers across the state, and it's time that we put guardrails on this, again, to protect our students that's in high school. 1 in 10 high school seniors admitted that they have tried the product in the last 30 days, which should be alarming. As I mentioned, this is unregulated, unchecked, so it doesn't fall under ABC, ALEA, Alabama Health. So when you go into a convenience store and you see these products, you think that someone has looked over them, and that is just complete inaccuracy. So my bill, what it does is puts it under ABC. We have a third party that tests the product to make sure that the ingredients are accurate and what is being said. It's in 21 and over alcoholic, beverage stores, or it will not be sold with ABC, but CBD stores or things of that nature, as long as it's okay with the municipality and the county.
That bill now also goes to the Senate. Now on to the Senate, where lawmakers considered legislation that would prohibit cell phones in schools. Senate Bill 92 from State Senator Donnie Chastain would make it state law that students cannot use cell phones during instructional time. A substitute bill was adopted that removes the penalties in the bill. Lawmakers said they want to collect data on how the law is working before enacting punitive measures. State Senator Chris Elliott proposed another amendment that would make an exception for students communicating with their parents. but senators rejected that proposal after Chasteen pointed out how impractical it could make the law.
The research shows that, a couple of things I want to point out. Teachers, 80% of the teachers want cell phones out of the classroom. They're there to teach. I think we got to go back and remember what we have these kids in school for. That's to get an education. And teachers are spending too much of their time trying to just get kids to put their cell phones up, and that's not what they're there for. So this bill would eliminate that during the instructional time.
Senator, I appreciate your work on this bill, and I've thought long and hard on it, and you've laid this out and done good work, and I think narrowed the scope of it some. Here's my concern, and I've talked with the sponsor about this. I communicate with my kids throughout the day about some mundane but very important things. Practice got canceled. My ride home changed, or I'm not able to ride home with little Johnny, little Bobby. I think a reasonable exception would also be for the student to communicate with their parent or legal guardian. And that's the amendment, is adding another exception to let the parent, us, communicate with our child. I don't want to outlaw me communicating or prohibit me communicating with my child or my child communicating with me.
That bill passed and now goes to the House, which has already passed its own version of that bill. The State House had a special guest this week. You've probably heard the story of Lulu Gribben, the Mountain Brook teenager who was attacked by a shark in the Gulf and survived. She has shown tremendous positivity despite losing part of her leg and arm, and has used the experience to advocate for policies that can prevent shark attacks. Capitol Journal's Randy Scott reports on Lulu's visit to the legislature.
Hello, my name's Lulu.
With those words, 16-year-old Lulu Gribben arrives at the Alabama State House. The Mountain Brook student is here to talk to lawmakers about House Bill 437, a bill that relates to an incident from June of 2024 when her life changed.
I think it was around 3. We were diving for sand dollars, and then we were headed in, we were riding the waves in, and I turned around and my best friend screamed, "Shark."
Plans for a fun day at a Florida beach were interrupted.
I saw a big shadow, but we all just started swimming for our lives. And then I was like, in movies, they think like you should calm down because sharks go for all the frantic stuff. So I yelled that and I calmed down.
A shark attacked Lulu and her friends.
My other friend was bitten, and we've never really figured out who was bitten first. But my hand was bitten first, and I remember just lifting it out of the water, and I was stunned because there was no hand there, and I couldn't feel it because of all the shock I was in.
She was also bitten on her leg before bystanders from the shore could pull her to safety.
I just remember everything about it.
Since this incident, Lulu has worked hard in her recovery. Now, her journey brings her to the People's House for House Bill 437. It proposes setting up a warning system to alert people of a shark attack in the area of the coast they're in.
With this bill in place, we can prevent further accidents in the future, and I'm just so excited to be able to pass it. So, thank you.
Representative David Faulkner sponsors House Bill 437. He says there's a goal to get similar legislation before other states with beaches surrounding Alabama.
People have a right to know, and we can do that. It's 2025, and we can use our common sense and do this type of notification.
All in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? Your bill now has a favorable report and is headed to the House floor.
Yeah.
At the Alabama State House, Randy Scott, Capitol Journal.
Congratulations to Lulu. There was a pretty weird situation in the State House this week. Several House members received strange packages containing inappropriate material. According to the Alabama Law Enforcement Agency, the packages contained multiple images of child pornography. Special agents with the State Bureau of Investigation responded just after 9 a.m. on Wednesday after lawmakers reported receiving unexpected mail. By Thursday, Aaliyah announced the arrest of John Watson, a 54-year-old man from Dothan. Watson actually worked as a state employee for Aaliyah's driver's license division, but resigned upon his arrest on Thursday. He's being charged with 4 counts of distributing child pornography. Construction is well underway for Alabama's new State House here in Montgomery. With this current building in such disrepair, the state is aiming to provide a modern facility for lawmakers and those who visit the legislature. However, concerns are emerging about the project's financial structure and additional costs not covered in the initial budget. Capitol Journal's Jeff Sanders has more.
The new Alabama State House is quickly rising behind the current State House building in downtown Montgomery. Designed to fix long-standing problems like flooding, mold, and aging infrastructure, the project is being overseen by the Retirement Systems of Alabama. RSA is footing the bill for the construction with plans to lease the completed facility back to the state.
State House funding, okay, that's going to be a major issue.
Senator Greg Albritton, who chairs the Senate General Fund Budget Committee, is raising concerns not just about the new building's nearly $300 million price tag, but about the added cost still to come. Demolishing the old State House, building a new parking deck, and developing surrounding green space could push the total project cost to roughly $400 million.
The biggest contributor to the general fund is the interest that we're earning from monies that we hold in the bank. That includes federal money, state money, ARPA money, all of that. We're still holding a large sum of cash because we're paying as we get things accomplished. All of that money is going to dry up.
Albritton says lawmakers must plan now for those extra expenses, especially as temporary funding sources begin to fade.
What other material and matters are we going to need in differences? We're not going to be able to take everything from here and just shift it over. It won't fit, for one thing, and the other is it doesn't meet requirements technology. So there's going to be a lot of cost involved with that. That is not in the cost of the building.
The new State House is expected to be ready for lawmakers by late 2026, hopefully just in time for the 2027 legislative session. Reporting in Montgomery, I'm Jeff Sanders for Capitol Journal.
Turning now to Washington, where Congress got one step closer this week to enacting President Donald Trump's domestic agenda. House Republicans narrowly passed the budget framework that aims to cut taxes and slash spending. Alex Engel reports from Capitol Hill on how Alabama's lawmakers fit into this week's big vote.
Alabama's delegation split on party lines in the vote to adopt the GOP budget blueprint that paves the way for Trump's agenda. Hardline conservatives, including Congressman Barry Moore, were hesitant at first to support the measure until they got assurances that there would be deep spending cuts in it.
Motion is adopted without objection.
The House passed the budget framework on Thursday to kickstart the process of crafting legislation to extend Trump's tax cuts and boost spending for the military and border. All of Alabama's Republicans voted for it.
I think it's at the end, it's turned out to be well, and I think it's so we can move forward.
But it wasn't an easy road to get to final adoption. Congressman Robert Aderholt said fiscal hawks wanted assurances of deep spending cuts to offset the tax cuts before supporting it.
A lot of members were concerned on the House side that the Senate would not do enough cuts, and that's what we wanted to ultimately see.
One of the GOP members reluctant to back it was Congressman Barry Moore, a member of the House Freedom Caucus. He said the stark difference in spending cuts between the House, set at least $1.5 trillion, and the Senate's cut, set at least $4 billion, was concerning. But Moore ultimately voted for the measure after seeing that Trump would support significant spending cuts.
He knows that's just a starting line and just gets the ball rolling for us to get our agenda moving.
Speaker Mike Johnson and Senate Majority Leader John Thune also teamed up to encourage Republicans to get behind the budget framework.
We are committed to finding at least $1.5 trillion in savings for the American people, while also preserving our essential programs.
But Democrats argue there will be cuts to Medicaid and the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. The House committee that oversees Medicaid is set to cut $880 billion under the plan. Congressman Shamari Figure says these spending cuts will harm Alabamians.
They are seeking to take benefits away from the most needy Americans. They are proposing SNAP benefit cuts that are of a scale that's going to be disastrous for too many families. They are proposing taking health care away from the people that need it most.
Now the House and Senate have adopted the same plan. The committees will have to hash out the details of exactly how it will enact those tax and spending cuts, which could prove even trickier than this week's vote. Reporting on Capitol Hill, Alex Engel, Capitol Journal.
You may remember the Rebuild Alabama Gas Tax and Infrastructure Plan that was passed by the legislature back in 2019. One of the first announced projects funded by that new revenue was an ambitious plan to four-lane Highway 82 across a dangerous 3-mile stretch in Prattville. That project is finally complete, and this week, Governor Kay Ivey joined local officials to cut the ribbon on the newly expanded highway.
Our project has widened nearly 3 miles of Highway 82 between U.S. Highway 31 and Highway 14, closing a gap that had languished for nearly 4 decades. In fact, this section of Highway 82 was one of the highest traffic volume 2-lane sections of roadway in the state, making it a priority. The widening we celebrate today was made possible by the Rebuild Alabama Act, and it represents an investment in Prattville and Autauga County of nearly $40 million.
In 2019, when we passed the Rebuild Alabama Act, we did so with US 82 in mind. We were determined to finally finish what so many others put on hold. The approval of Rebuild Alabama has been a game changer for Alabama drivers. Many underfunded and languishing Alabama road and bridge improvement products are at last being completed. In the 6 years since Rebuild Alabama has been law, we have funded over 500 road and bridge projects benefiting all 67 counties.
The immediate thing that it does is it provides a safer roadway for our citizens. We have a lot of truck traffic, as you may can hear in the background, with the industries in this area, a lot of semis. So the bridges that were there were narrow, and now there'll be a bridge in each direction, and the traffic will be separated. It'll be a much, much safer environment for everyone who travels the roadway.
Each year, Alabama Public Television honors a select group of high school students as young heroes, those who have made a difference in their communities and schools, all while facing unique challenges and adversity. This year's young heroes are Bailey Cox from Hoover, Count Threadgill from Auburn, Jaden Johnson of Decatur, Jamirical Williams of Marbury, and Benjamin Wortham of Madison. You can read about each of these students' inspiring stories on our website. Just go to aptv.org/heroes. And we honored the young heroes this week in Montgomery. They visited the legislature, and I got a chance to interview them here in our studio. Here's some of what they had to say.
This is an incredible opportunity. I'm so glad to have been honored in this way, and this is an excellent scholarship to help me pay for college and all of my future goals and things like that.
It's definitely been an honor. I believe that it's kind of shaped the way that I think, and for my future endeavors, like I sort of have this passion for international business, and this has kind of introduced me to the legislators and the senators, and so it's given me connections for everything in the future.
A message that I would like to give to the young people out there is to definitely just keep on pushing. Even if you fall on your face, at least you're moving forward, because you can never just stop. And for me and my house fire, it was really hard, but I just had to really adapt and be resourceful with the resources that I had.
you're going to face challenges. That's a given. That's a part of life. You just can't stop. You can take a break. You can breathe, just figure it out, but you just can't stop moving. You have to keep going.
Really impressive students. Congratulations again to our young heroes. Coming up next, I'll be joined by Senate Education Budget Committee Chairman Arthur Orr to talk about that Education Trust Fund budget moving this week. And after that, Commerce Secretary Ellen McNair is in studio for an update on the state's economic development efforts. Stay with us.
You can watch past episodes of Capital Journal online at video.aptv.org. Capital Journal episodes are also available on APTV's free mobile app. You can also connect with Capital Journal and link to past episodes on Capital Journal's Facebook page. And you can listen to past episodes of Capital Journal when you're driving or on the go with Capital Journal podcasts. Keep up with what's happening with Capital Journal.
You're watching Alabama Public Television, celebrating 70 years of service to Alabama.
Welcome back to Capital Journal. Joining me next is State Senator Arthur Orr, Chairman of the Senate Education Budget Committee. Mr. Chairman, welcome to Capital Journal.
Thank you, Todd. Good to be with you.
You've had a busy week.
I have.
It is your big week. Education budget in committee. That's a long process. On the floor, passed with not a lot of fanfare. Can you kind of give us the high points of this record-setting Education Trust Fund budget?
Well, I guess the big unique change this year is starting the student-based funding formula. I know that's a mouthful, but it's important for the future of public education in our state. The research shows that it costs more to educate a child that's in poverty or an English language learner or a special education child. And we also want to give more money for gifted programs for those children that want to excel in the classroom. And so all that to say, we used one of our savings account that we put in place several years ago when we had record-breaking revenue numbers, and we put that aside, and we wanted to wait for a day to establish the student-based funding formula. So we established it today with the legislation that passed the Senate. Chairman Garrett will be handling it in the House, and it puts a funding formula in place for these special populations of students, and will give the schools the resources to help with those educations of those children. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of the big milestone, I guess, in this budget, but it will take time. So there's no thinking that it's going to instantly translate into higher test scores next year or the year after. It's just going to take a long journey. It is going to be a long journey, but if you don't start the journey, you'll never get there. So yeah, we hope it'll pay off over time.
And y'all been working on this a while. This task force was at work for maybe over a year trying to develop that. I mean, look, when you start saying you're going to change the funding model, I'm sure everybody gets a little nervous. So was it tough to kind of sell your colleagues on the concept?
Well, we wound up with a hybrid model, and by that I mean we're keeping intact the foundation, the current foundation program that was established in the mid-90s, and then on top of that, out of these savings that we have set aside, we'll start funding the student-weighted model. But it's very important that we be committed to this because at some point we're going to have to keep raising. We are going to keep raising the amount year after year, but we're going to have to make the financial commitment year after year after year because we cannot shortchange our educators that are relying on this additional funding because they're going to go out and hire people and establish programs to help these particular children make physical changes to their schools or whatever. that we just need to be stand behind that and make sure that we're good on our end of the commitment. And then there's some accountability in there, Todd, that we expect if we give you a substantial increase in funding, that your test scores and your outputs of your students will improve over time. So it's a two-way street. We give you more money for these populations, but you improve the outputs from your schools over time.
Two-way street, that's a good way to put it. I wanted to ask about specific investments in literacy and numeracy. You've championed both of these issues, and we've seen some results. I mean, I know you can't directly correlate some of these, but we've had some success. We've seen some success in terms of reading scores, math scores go up. So how big of a priority was it for you in crafting this budget to make sure those priorities are funded? Numeracy Act, Literacy Act in this budget.
Well, I'll have to give also credit to Governor Ivey, who the budget that she sent across the street to us continued those investments. So we're about where we need to be with literacy. Numeracy is a much larger year-over-year type investment, but the governor recognizes the importance of keeping the pedal to the metal and making sure that we push those programs out across the state. Again, we're about there with literacy, but we still have some pushing to do when it comes to numeracy or the math bill.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned that the governor starts that process, right? It's the second day of session. She submits her budget. It's in the Constitution and all that. Can you kind of take us through that process? Because I imagine that y'all are having conversations months ahead of session in terms of talking to LSA, talking to the finance department. How does that process kind of play out behind the scenes before a day like today we see it on the floor?
Well, the finance office leads the charge, and they gather the information, talk to the superintendent of schools, Dr. Mackey, and all the higher ed institutions, other organizations, other agencies that are in the budget, talking to their leadership and saying, what are your needs? What are your asks? Mm-hmm. And they sift through a lot of that, and they do a lot of heavy lifting, if you will, in the process, and make determinations. And of course, it comes across the street. And at that juncture, that same crowd will descend upon whatever chairman has the budget in his domain.
It's your turn this year, right?
So at that time, they'll come and make the case to either support what the governor did or look to increase, or nobody asked for a decrease,
right.
So that would. But do those kind of, it's just a process, and it works quite well. We work well with the governor's office. Most of the decisions that the executive branch makes, we like to try to keep and preserve, because there's been a lot of thought that's gone into it, and there's sound reasoning when it does come across the street in most matters.
Well, and y'all are always tracking revenue numbers, right? And so I've noticed in recent years, y'all have waited until kind of relatively late in the session to start moving the budgets, because you've got 3 more months of revenue data than when the session first began. I guess that's by design.
And probably human nature as well, because just all that's going on in a particular session, we know when our deadline is or our finish line is with the number of days, legislative days that we have, and the calendar days. But so it's I wouldn't say orchestrated, but we know kind of our parameters and operate within them. But you're right, we don't know. There could be some surprises in revenue, and we've seen, of course, a lot of change in the stock market in the last couple of days. But it's something we are constantly monitoring month after month, the different revenues from the different sources of revenue.
Well, speaking of that, you have been consistently this session warning, if you want to use that word, your colleagues about, look, yes, this is a record budget. We've had year-over-year record budgets, but we've got to save as much as we can, because it could be an economic downturn. Even a slight economic downturn could mean real, revenue shortfalls in the ETF. Talk about that and what your message has been to your colleagues.
Yeah, so for your viewers, we fund education primarily out of income taxes and sales taxes. And if the economy declines and is in the ditch, then you're not selling things, people aren't buying things, so your sales taxes go down. And a lot of times man hours, or they lose jobs,
Right.
and unemployment goes up. So you lose on the income tax side as well. So that's can really cause a problem for us. And one thing that's concerning, Todd, is not many people in the legislature were around here during the Great Recession days when it was awful, and we were cutting left and right. And because we have to balance our budgets, we're not like Washington that can run budget deficits year after year after year. We have to balance, and if the money's not there, we can't spend it, and that's a good thing. We have to make cuts, and that's what happens. So all that to say, do keep reminding my colleagues about, we love to do tax cuts. That's great. The people of Alabama don't want to pay a penny more than they have to fund a reasonably funded government that's not fat or wasteful or exorbitant. They have that expectation, and they have the right to have that expectation. But we also have to be mindful of the economy and how a downdraft or declining economy can really affect how we're able to properly fund education, be it the colleges and universities or K-12 or pre-K, which is so important to many families across the state. So it's a balancing act, and we certainly do the best we can.
Those were some tough years. I guess it was like 2011, 2012,
Exactly.
in that range. Were you general fund chairman
Yes.
back then? Okay, so that
Yes.
was probably even
It
more
was
painful.
worse. It was worse.
So yeah, that probably informs, because over the last 5 or 6 years, y'all have done so much in terms of that. We're saving a rainy day. We're saving a rainy day. I'm sure that's informed by that experience quite a bit. Well, let me ask you, let's just say there is an economic downturn. Do we have enough saved in those rainy day accounts and things like that where we could weather the storm relatively well?
On the education side, I would like to think so, because we have rainy day funds, as you said, and we also have the Advancement in Technology Fund that is kind of a supplement, and then this Educational Opportunity Fund, the one that we started back when there was a lot of money back in 2023, and that's the reason because once you spend it, it's obviously gone. So just be very conservative and not get ahead of ourselves on our spending. And I think that's what happened in 2008, 9, and 10. Before, as we went into the Great Recession, they kept the spending high because they had these savings accounts thinking it was all going to get better, and it didn't get better. So we just got to be careful, and again, not enable a overindulgent government that is spending resources just because it has it.
It's a good message. Well, look, congratulations on getting the budget through the Senate. It really is the biggest single thing the legislature does is pass the Education Trust Fund budget. So it's a big deal. We'll be tracking it in the House and onto the governor's desk when it's time. But thanks again for your time.
Thank you. Good to be with you.
We'll be right back.
You can watch past episodes of Capitol Journal online anytime at Alabama Public Television's website, aptv.org. Click on the Online Video tab on the main page. You can also connect with Capitol Journal and link to past episodes on Capitol Journal's Facebook page.
Alabama Public Television is your place for quality educational services. Free professional development for educators and child care providers. Access to free curriculum-aligned videos, lesson plans, and instructional resources with PBS Learning Media. And all the PBS Kids programs parents know and trust. Learn something new every day with Alabama Public Television. Visit us at aptv.org/education to learn more.
Is a World War II-era battleship that first served in the Atlantic Theater, but was better known for helping to take Japanese-held islands in the Pacific between 1943 and 1945. During the Battle of the Philippine Sea, the Alabama's state-of-the-art radar alerted the fleet to incoming aircraft, providing the Americans enough time to scramble fighters and decimate the attacking force. Later, the Alabama served during the Battle of Leyte Gulf and anchored in Tokyo Bay to unload Allied occupation forces. In 1964, the state of Alabama took possession of the battleship. Alabama school children raised $100,000 in nickels and dimes to help bring the ship to Mobile and create Battleship Memorial Park. The park features the Alabama, the World War II-era submarine USS Drum, and an American military aircraft collection. Battleship Memorial Park is one of the state's most visited attractions.
Welcome back to Capitol Journal. Joining me next is Ellen McNair, Secretary of the Alabama Department of Commerce. Ms. Secretary, thanks for coming on the show.
Oh, yes, my pleasure.
Well, there's a lot to discuss. I wanted to talk about this new report you have, new and expanding industry in Alabama. Your department is responsible for recruiting industry and it's been around for a long time. What is the newest development? What can you tell us about new and expanding industry in Alabama?
So this is the report for 2024, and the governor just recently released our numbers for 2024, and we're just really thrilled at what the number showed. So we had over $7 billion in capital investment, over 220 different projects all across the state that reflected in the creation of over 8,500 new jobs for the state.
Wow, that's fantastic. I mean, how does that compare to other years? Are we growing in terms of the amount of projects that are coming to Alabama?
So typically in an election year, you're going to see companies a little on the sideline waiting. So if you look back at 2016 and 2020, there was really a pretty big dip between those years.
They're waiting to see, okay, what's the landscape going to look like politically?
That's right. And however, this year we actually had growth over 2023, which was very exciting to see. So we're very very excited about 2025 and 2026 to see, because our pipeline is strong.
Yeah. Talk about that process a little bit, about the process of how you and your team go about identifying a company. I mean, I know sometimes they come to you, but maybe identifying a company, negotiating, finding a location. I mean, how does that process work? Because it seems to be a lot has to go in that. It probably lasts a lot longer than maybe we take it for granted.
Oh, yeah. For each of these over 200 projects, they can range anywhere from months to literally years to develop. And the competition is extremely tough. I mean, it is a full-on competitive process, which is exciting because we have a great team in Alabama. Our local economic developers are very strong, and that's where so much of this work is done, is at the local level. And we at the state try to support. We try to identify the opportunities and then support with resources the communities to be able to land these different projects, because these projects do land in communities. And it's important for us to provide that assistance and that resource to come in and help those companies locate there and grow. But the entire process is really quite complex. And the economic development strategy that we designed last year and rolled out last October really does roll out and lay out our targeted sectors, and then the strategies with in each one of those sectors. So we have a great team at Commerce that is out there every single day all over the globe looking for opportunities, and then they bring those opportunities back, and we work very closely with our regional partners, our utility partners, and our local EDOs, our local economic development organizations to make them a reality.
Absolutely. Yeah, I saw Bob Smith on the plane the other day, and I was like, I wonder where he's going to recruit
all over the globe. All over the globe. Yeah.
You mentioned the local, and I keep hearing from a lot of especially local lawmakers about the impact of the SEEDS Act. That it's really a game changer in terms of local investment, something that was long needed and the legislature delivered.
Yeah, no, that program in just a year and a half has been so successful. So what the problem was is we really were a victim of our own success. So we were really out as a state of industrial sites that prepared and ready for market. And when you don't have product, you can't compete for the projects. So the idea with the SEEDS Act, which was Secretary Canfield and that team prior to my coming on board, was to get legislation that provided resources by the state to support the locals in identifying industrial sites that together we could work to develop and then have available for the market. So last year, the state gave 29 different sites and communities across the state, approximately $30 million in investment, and that was matched by a local match of over $37 million by the locals. So, you know, that one year, $67 million went into developing sites across the state.
So like infrastructure, rail, stuff like that, for an industrial site to become marketable.
That's correct. And even the testing to be sure it's viable.
Okay.
Like, you know, phase 1 environmentals, geotesting, that kind of thing.
Okay, so that a company knows, okay, this is a viable site and all that. That's really important. I keep hearing about the SEEDS Act as truly impactful. You mentioned economic incentives a little bit. I wanted to ask you about that because you were before the committee the other day, kind of explaining the incentives process, what gets utilized and what doesn't. And I wanted you to comment on that a little bit because I think sometimes there's a perception when it comes to economic incentives, because it is an arms race many times for companies. But y'all don't actually use them for everything, right? And so it's not just like this giveaway. I found those comments interesting. Can you kind of elaborate on that?
Sure. So just using this past year, the 2024 report, as I said, we had over 220 different projects. Only 15 of those projects used the Jobs Act resource.
Wow. So
it was used for the most competitive projects where we really had to come in and step up. But we use those as prudently as we possibly can. We do have other incentives and other resources that we use, like our training program, abatements, those kind of other incentives. But for the big Jobs Act, big ticket item Jobs Act incentives, only 15 of our over 220 projects were utilized last year.
That's notable, and you know, over the years it's evolved because if you go back to the 90s or early 2000s, it was basically cash, right? I mean, I remember the legislature would have to approve, you know, each project by project because it basically was coming out of the ETF. Now it's very accountable, you know, very targeted, and you get that. You got to deliver the jobs to get the Jobs Act money. So I think that's worth noting.
Well, and that all changed in 2015 with the new incentive structure. And I really, again, commend the team that was in place at that point, really looking at what could be the most impactful and really the most cost-effective and prudent. So, as you said, with the Jobs Act, the jobs have to be created, the investment has to be made before the state is coming up with the money. So there's not any upfront money that is utilized, and then if the project doesn't come to fruition.
Right, takes away that risk.
Right, and there is a really strong process of making sure that these companies are fulfilling their responsibilities with the jobs created and the maintenance of those jobs. So it's just not one and done.
Yeah. We're almost out of time, but I wanted to ask you about this. It's just, you look at the news, it's such a, I don't know, uncertain global economy right now. And with, I mean, like you mentioned election years, people getting a little hesitant. What are you hearing from site selectors, those who companies hire to locate and everything? What are you hearing in terms of the uncertainty globally? Is that impacting at all the folks who might be looking at Alabama for their next investment?
We're always monitoring every opportunity and every challenge that could be facing us, because that's a constant thing, right? The world is always evolving, so there's always room for opportunities and to jump on those opportunities, and then there's always challenges out there. So you've always got to be aware of that. You're always looking at that. We are very excited about the hopefully opportunity with some additional funding that we're requesting is to opening new European offices and international offices in Korea and Japan.
Oh, wow.
So we're very excited about that and really being able to have people on the ground in those different countries to be able to sell Alabama full time.
Absolutely. And the dredging at the Port of Mobile will be done, I think, in July. And so I don't think we've even, can imagine the impact that that's going to have on growth.
Just another great tool for our state.
Absolutely. We're out of time, but thanks again for your time,
thank
and
you.
we'll see you soon.
Okay, thank you.
We'll be right back.
You can watch past episodes of Capital Journal online at video.aptv.org. Capital Journal episodes are also available on APTV's free mobile app. You can also connect with Capital Journal and link to past episodes on Capital Journal's Facebook page. And you can listen to past episodes of Capital Journal when you're driving or on the go with Capital Journal podcasts.
In terms of importance and influence, few performers in the history of country music can compare with Hank Williams Sr. Revered by fans drawn to the sincerity of his songs, Hank Williams, during his brief 29 years, was instrumental in turning hillbilly music into country music. The Butler County native became enthralled with music from a young age, playing harmonica and organ, and acquiring his first guitar around the time he was 8 years old. By the end of 1951, Williams had amassed 24 top 10 singles, with 6 reaching #1. A key figure in the development of modern country music, Williams personified the musical genre's shift from a regional, rural phenomenon to nationwide acceptance. His legacy remains alive today, with the heartfelt nature of his performances remaining the benchmark by which country music performers are measured. In April 2010, the Pulitzer Prize Board awarded Williams with a posthumous Special Citation Award.
That's our show for this week. Thanks for watching. We'll be back next week, starting on Monday, with our nightly coverage of the Alabama Legislature. For our Capital Journal team, I'm Todd Stacy. We'll see you next time.